where we left off last time, how things have been going, what any latest updates, things like that.
All right. So, we talked about that my job is as a choir director at my church. It's a
Mm-hmm.
paid position. And for the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, I have been really allowed to do what I want. I've been given free reign and things have been really good. Um, I've been getting good reviews, and, the pastor says, he really likes what I'm choosing. And now all of a sudden, it's like, it's not good enough anymore. He wants to be in charge of everything. He has kind of pulled back on allowing me to choose stuff, and so this is really making me feel like, what's the point? What am I really? It's not the music that the choir is offering from us if I can't even pick it. If am I having other people who aren't even in my choir picking music, um, and so now it's gotten to the point where I really have a difficult time relating to him. I avoid contact with him as much as possible. He's asked to meet with me a couple times, and I've made excuses why I can't. And I just am not really sure what my next step should be, because he's making me feel really inadequate. Like before, it was like, oh yeah, you're doing a great job, everything's good. Now all of a sudden it's like, whoop, we're going to take that back from you, and you're not going to have the free reign that you had before. And so now I'm like, what am I even doing here? And it's kind of like to the point where I'm feeling like, why bother? I should just quit my job. But it's something that I love to do and I'm passionate about. But I just don't know how to handle my relationship with him anymore.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's start with one piece and kind of dig into that a little bit more. So I heard you mention a lot of feelings, um, a lot about feeling like you don't have as much control as you used to, how it started out good and then it kind of started to go downhill. So talk to me a little bit more about the feelings that you personally have, not toward him or toward the situation, but just some of the feelings that it brings up for you about yourself.
It makes me angry. That's probably the one first thing that comes to mind. But it also makes me feel like I'm not good enough for this job. I told them from the beginning I don't have a degree in music. This is something that I just do because I love it. And everybody was okay to let that slide. And now, he comes in and he has a music degree, and this is his area. And it's making me feel like I'm inadequate, like I'm not good enough. And so it's not only from when he talks to me about that, but then even when the choir is performing, I'm constantly having thoughts in the back of my head. Why are you doing this? You don't even have a degree. You're not good enough. And it's frustrating. It makes it hard for me to do what I love. So I'm angry that it's come to this. I feel devalued as a person. Um, those are probably the two biggest.
Okay. Okay, so I think that the anger is an important piece, but I want to focus more on the feeling devalued part. Um, so I'm just going to ask a little bit more of, um, you mentioned that feeling that devalued piece of feeling like you don't have a degree in it, but it's something that you love. It's been fine so far, and now it kind of feels like out of the blue, now all of a sudden that's not good enough. Um, so talk to me a little bit more about what maybe in other areas, or if it's just confined to work, of what that looks like in like your everyday life. Kind of paint me a picture of what that can look like and how that can affect how you live your life outside of work.
I didn't really think about how it affected my life outside of work. But I guess I feel it a little bit at home. It's kind of one of those things where you feel like you're good at something and you're doing a good job, and people tell you you're doing a good job, and then you realize that people don't think you're really doing, or some people don't think you're really doing a good job. And it's like trying to, do things I need to do at home. I work from home a lot. Um, so when I'm home, I'm working, and then other things don't get done. And then the family is always like, well, why isn't this done? Or why couldn't we have this ready? So there's other areas then that I don't feel like I'm managing well. And so, I keep telling myself you have to reorder your priorities and you have to, you know, spend your time wiser. But I have to get my work done and I have to get my housework done and it doesn't get done. And then I feel like it's just a whole one thing leads into another. And I guess I didn't really put that together till today.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So, and maybe that's why it's so frustrating at church because, for a while I was getting validated there and now I'm not getting validated there. And then I don't feel like I'm getting validated at home either because I'm not doing what I feel like I should be doing here. So that's kind of uncomfortable.
Okay. All right. So I first want to address the fact that it takes a lot of courage to realize that. So I want to give you the proper validation that that shows a lot of progress in showing that you're able to make those connections. And like you said, how you didn't connect that until just now. So I don't want to dig too much deeper into that because I feel like we have so much to work on that we've already started today. So I want to focus in on those feelings that you're having and how that kind of looks in your thought processes. And do you ever catch yourself kind of having, obviously thoughts, but just anything that's kind of intrusive on how you feel about yourself, any negative self-talk, things like that?
Yeah, lately a lot. Lately it's been a lot of, like I said, as we're even performing or as I'm practicing with the choir, the little things in the back of my head, why are you even here? You don't have a degree, you're not good enough at this. You shouldn't be standing up here, doing this when there are a lot of other people qualified in your congregation who could be doing it. So it's that negative self-talk in there, but that's probably what it is the most. Like, you're not good enough.
Okay. All right. So is there, you mentioned that like even in moments when you're performing with the choir, that's when that comes up. Is there other times when the choir isn't performing, just everyday life, regular situations where things like that kind of come up and pop up in the back of your head?
Yeah. So it would be like keeping my house.
Okay.
Like when I set out goals for myself for the day and I make my checklist or whatever and I only get, 2 of the 7 things done, and it's like, well, you really are not a good housekeeper. You're not good at this. You're not good enough. And it's frustrating because they don't say that. They don't come right out and say that to you. But you can tell by the way, they look at things around and, and so that pretty much says it to me that they think that I'm not good enough either.
All right. So a little while back you did mention that you've tried to get yourself to reprioritize and to figure out how to make it all work. And focusing on this instead of that and trying to, like you said, just reprioritize what needs to happen. And it kind of seems like from the way that you spoke about it that hasn't been working, or that you feel like it's still not turning out the way that you would hope it would.
I feel like I'm not getting any more done than I did before.
Okay.
I feel like I guess I go back to my old routines of what I know I can get done, and that's not enough. And now this whole thing with somebody else wanting to come in and pick my music, that was like, that was like the joy that I had, and so I'm not finding joy anywhere really. It's like everything's a drudge. So that's been hard.
Yeah. Okay, so so talk to me a little bit more about what it kind of feels like when you have that list of things and just kind of as time passes, what that looks like throughout the day. Just depending on what you can get done, things like that. Does that make sense? Where walk me through the feelings that you have in a typical day. So say you start out the day with a list of things.
And I usually start out pretty positive.
Okay.
Like feeling like I can get, like my list is manageable.
Mm-hmm.
And then till I get a couple, I get going on something, and then it's like I feel overwhelmed by that thing because that turned into way more than I thought it was supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally complete that, and then it's time for task 2, and then before I look up, it's time for the kids to be home from school. And I look around and I was like, what did I really do today? What did I really get accomplished? I don't know. My list feels overwhelming. My life feels overwhelming.
Okay. You mentioned a lot of different things that you've tried to do, of reprioritizing, taking off this, adding this. What does it look like to, instead of having a list of all the things that you have to accomplish by the end of the day, to kind of do that as you go along? Does that make sense? Where instead of having this big list that it's like, I have all of this to get done, and looking at this huge big picture, what if it just, what would it look like for you to just take one thing at a time and just do the next thing?
That might work.
Okay, so why don't you, let's just do a very brief kind of walkthrough of what that might look like for you. If you feel like that it would go badly, you can talk through that, but let's start with how that would look like from the start of your day to the end of your day. Of, instead of having this big list that you start out your day with, what if you start out with no list and just take one little thing at a time?
Okay, so you want me to talk through what I would do?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, so they don't really count my list until the kids go to school, because all that other stuff has to happen anyway. So I have to get them breakfast and get them off to school. And then I guess the first thing is I have to clean up the kitchen because it's a mess for making breakfast and getting them ready, getting their lunches ready. So I probably have to empty the dishwasher so that I can load the dishes back in the dishwasher. Wash anything by hand that needs to be washed, and then put the dishes, obviously put dry the dishes and put them away.
Mm-hmm.
Then I usually have to go in and clean up the kids' bedrooms. They clean their own up, but they don't really make their beds or anything, so I like to have the beds made. So I do that. But then that ends up into picking up wash and, getting wash started for the day, which often that's part of the problem, because then I start it and I forget that it's in there and I don't put it in the dryer, and then that whole mess. And then I have to fit work in there somewhere because I have to do a couple of hours of work every day. And that feels sort of unproductive because I'm sitting in front of my computer and not getting anything done in the house. So then after I would get that done, I guess that would be lunchtime. Then I really need to go around and start getting the house straightened up, figure out what I'm going to make for dinner. And I guess I feel like I'm ticking things still off a list.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I don't have a written list in front of me, the list is in here.
Okay.
So that, I guess because I've always been that way, my mom always, worked off a list, and so that's kind of what I've adopted, and she'd get her list done and I'm not getting mine done.
Okay, so first, that sounds like a comparison, but I don't think we have the time to go into that, but that is something that I want to work off of in the future, of comparing yourself to other people. But I want to focus on the idea of, we started out by saying, what would it look like to just do one thing at a time? And as you were speaking, I saw the action of kind of that spiraling effect, where it started out okay, doing one thing. So I guess after getting the kids to school, starting with where we left off of before we left the house. So just cleaning up breakfast. And then it turned into, but before I can clean up, I have to do this so that I can clean up. And then after cleaning up, then I guess I have to pick up where the kids dropped everything before. And it kind of just turned into this very quick downward spiral.
And that gets worse.
Yeah. And so I wanna be able to validate that for you, and to be able to make sure that you know that that's a lot of what mothers feel, but to also help you understand that everything on the list doesn't have to get checked off every single day. And it seems to me, and from what we've covered in the past, is setting really high expectations for yourself. And there's nothing wrong with high expectations, especially because you've shown that those are things that you can accomplish. But sometimes having a big list of things to do, and day after day after day not being able to accomplish that can really be detrimental to how you feel about yourself, and how that can affect every aspect of your life, as we can kind of see here. So I want to kind of pull back a little bit and go back to how things are at work, and how that's been affecting everything else, but also how everything else has been affecting life at work. So what I want to do now is kind of work on the little homework piece. So thinking of, you mentioned that there's other people that you feel like might be more qualified to do what you do, and that why you don't feel good enough, and that kind of translates into things at home where you're not good enough. So let's kind of focus on those feelings, because those are things that over time can really just kind of keep you down low and not allow you to feel happiness and joy long term. So let's think of something that kind of combats the idea of there's other people that are more qualified. So although that might be true, some people might have more of an education than you. Let's focus on the fact that yes, there are other people that might have more of an education, but if that was the only thing that was important for the job, wouldn't they have the job and you wouldn't? You know what I'm saying? So
Maybe.
Just to think about the other aspects of the job that don't require an education. People skills, being able to relate to people, being able to sit with people in their stuff, regardless of how it's going to affect you, but also just thinking of how that might be affecting their performance in the choir. So just kind of sitting with people and the things that they're going through. And as we've talked, I definitely feel that empathy from you of being able to really care for people, and obviously being a mother, you do a lot of caring for other people. So I think that that's an area where it's difficult for you to stop caring for people and to really focus on yourself. So in a moment where you're feeling like nothing that you do is good enough, you're still focusing on the other people, and this is what they need and I'm not that. So let's try and think of ways that throughout your week until we meet again, that when those things come up, what's something that you can say to yourself, something that we've gone over, some kind of validation or encouragement for yourself that can kind of combat those thoughts, and then those things that can cause you to spiral, like we just saw in the walkthrough of what your day could look like.
Well, I guess the biggest thing that I heard is I don't have to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
That has been something that I have always felt is my responsibility to get it all done. So maybe if I can just lay that piece down and like remind myself every day, I don't have to get it all done. I mean, it's always going to be there the next day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess with my situation at work, just remembering that it's really about the people and not my education. I was given this job because I love music and I love I love people, and so this kind of just came together for me this way. So if I can remember that, maybe I'll try to work on that till next time.
Okay, so let's quick before we kind of end this session, Let's think of one way that you might be able to, because as we talked about, when we tried to play through the idea of focusing on one thing at a time, how that quickly turned into a spiral. Let's try and think of just one thing that throughout this week, what you can do that once, because I want you to work on that this week, to try and focus on one thing at a time, not have this big master list. Let's try and think of one thing that when you catch yourself doing that downward spiral, what you can do to kind of bring yourself back. That doesn't mean that because you started here and the spiral got you to down here that you have to end up back up here. It just means that you can catch yourself here and realize that this isn't where you started out, and instead of continuing down on the spiral, staying here and possibly being able to work your way back up. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's think of one thing that we can do that when you catch yourself in that spiral, of what it can look like to kind of stop that process and possibly bring you back up. But if not, it's okay. Just to stay where you're at and stop the spiral.
So are you saying something I have to do, or something I can tell myself, or what am I trying to get here?
Whatever you think would work best for you. If it works best for you to be able to combat some of that thinking, of that, now this is the next thing I have to do. This is the next thing.
Because I guess that was the thing that stuck with me when you said, just do the next thing.
Okay.
So if I can, get something done, I don't have to look down my list. I don't have to look at 2 through 10. I just have to look at 2. So I get 1 done and just look at 2. And if I get 2 done, then I can look at 3. So just do the next thing.
Okay.
I think I can do that.
Okay. All right. So we want to end by saying that I'm really proud of you, and I feel like we made a lot of progress this session. I hope that you feel that too. And we had a lot of good discussion and a lot of good homework for next week. And I will be happy to see you again next week and see how things are going.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, this is super weird.